They'd been part of the same friend group for years, trading jabs like it was a sport. Nicholas and Alyssa swore they hated each other until the night they kissed in the dark, without knowing who was on the other side. The kiss was forbidden, intense, loaded with a desire neither of them knew existed. When the lights came on and their eyes met, the shock was devastating. But the taste of that kiss stayed imprinted on their skin, on their lips, on their souls. And what came after? A war between reason and desire that neither of them was prepared to face. If this story is already getting to you, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and become a member to get early access to upcoming stories. And if you felt it was really worth listening to, hit that super thanks button too. Your support makes all the difference and helps us keep bringing you stories that move you. Oh, and drop a comment below. Where are you listening from right now? The Sunday morning air carried the aroma of freshly brewed espresso and warm croissants as Nicholas walked into Willow's, the cozy cafe that had become the unofficial headquarters of their group. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, casting golden rectangles across the rustic wooden tables and exposed brick walls. The soft murmur of conversation mixed with the rhythmic hiss of the coffee machine, creating a soundtrack he'd learned to associate with these weekly brunches. And with her. Alyssa was already there, sitting at their usual corner table, her auburn hair catching the light like polished copper. She wore a cream-colored sweater that somehow made her hazel eyes look more green than brown today. Nicholas noticed, as he always noticed, though he'd sooner swallow glass than admit it. She was laughing at something their friend Maya had said, her head tilted slightly back, exposing the elegant line of her neck. When her gaze landed on him, the laughter died. Her expression shifted to something colder, more guarded, a look he knew well because he wore the same one. "Well, well," Alyssa said, her voice carrying that familiar ironic lilt. "Nicholas actually showed up on time. Should we be looking for signs of the apocalypse?" He slid into the seat across from her, close enough to catch the subtle vanilla scent of her perfume beneath the coffee smell. "I'm always on time. You just have a warped perception of reality." "Funny. I was going to say the same thing about you and your ability to admit when you're wrong." She raised her cup, some elaborate latte with art in the foam, and took a deliberate sip, watching him over the rim. Nicholas waved to the waitress, ordering a simple black coffee. When Alyssa raised an eyebrow, he couldn't resist. "Let me guess. You ordered the same thing as always. Oat milk vanilla latte, extra shot, and exactly 1 pump of caramel syrup. How adventurous." Color bloomed in her cheeks, a rosy flush that spread down her neck. "At least I know what I like. Unlike some people who pretend black coffee makes them interesting. I'm not pretending anything," he said, leaning slightly forward. The movement brought them closer, close enough that he could see the tiny freckles scattered across her nose, almost invisible unless you were looking closely. "I just don't need to cover up bitter truth with sweetness." "Is that what you think you're doing? Speaking bitter truths?" Her eyes flashed, but there was something else there too, something that made his pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with caffeine. Their friend Marcus laughed nervously. "Here we go again. Don't you two ever get tired of this?" "Of what?" they asked in unison, then glared at each other for the synchronicity. The truth was, Nicholas never got tired of it. These verbal sparring matches had become the highlight of his week, though he'd die before confessing that to anyone, especially to her. As an engineer, he appreciated the precision of her comebacks, the way her mind worked quickly to find exactly the words that would needle him most effectively. As a man, he appreciated, well, things he definitely shouldn't be appreciating about someone who supposedly drove him crazy. Alyssa set her cup down harder than necessary. "I'm just saying that some people could benefit from a little sweetness in their lives. Not everything has to be so rigid and controlled." "And some people," Nicholas shot back, "could benefit from a little structure instead of just acting on impulse, hoping everything works out through good intentions and positive thinking." She leaned forward too, now close enough that if either of them moved just a few inches, their foreheads would touch. "You know what your problem is, Nicholas. You think everything can be solved with logic and planning. But life doesn't work that way. People don't work that way." "And your problem," he said, his voice dropping lower, more intimate despite the public setting, "is that you think feelings and intuition are enough. But sometimes you need a foundation. Sometimes you need to think things through. The air between them crackled with tension so thick their friends had fallen silent. Nicholas could see Alyssa's pulse beating rapidly at the base of her throat. Her lips were slightly parted, and he found himself wondering, not for the first time, what they'd taste like. Probably like that ridiculously sweet coffee she always ordered. The thought should have been off-putting. It wasn't. Alyssa's eyes dropped to his hands where they rested on the table, fingers wrapped around the coffee cup. He had what she called engineer hands, long fingers, precise movements, always so controlled. She watched as his thumb traced the rim of the cup in a slow circle, and something deep in her stomach tightened inexplicably. She dragged her gaze back to his face, annoyed with herself. "You're impossible." "Funny, I was thinking the same thing about you," but his voice had lost some of its edge, replaced by something that sounded almost like curiosity. Maya cleared her throat loudly. "So, are you two actually going to eat? Or should we just get you a room to argue in?" The comment broke whatever spell had fallen over them. They both sat back, putting physical distance between them, though the charge in the air remained. Throughout the brunch they continued their dance, sharp comments followed by even sharper retorts, but underneath it all ran a current of awareness Nicholas couldn't ignore. When Alyssa reached for the creamer, her fingers brushed his. The contact lasted maybe 2 seconds, but it sent heat racing up his arm. She pulled back quickly, but not before he saw her pupils dilate slightly. When she bit into her avocado toast, he noticed the way she closed her eyes briefly, savoring the taste. When she caught him watching, she lifted her chin defiantly. "What?" "Nothing," he said, but his voice came out rougher than he'd intended. Later, as they argued about the best route to avoid traffic leaving the cafe, because of course they couldn't agree on even that, Nicholas found himself noticing the way she gestured with her hands when she was passionate about something, how she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was getting frustrated, the little line that appeared between her eyebrows when she was thinking hard. And he hated that he noticed. Hated that somewhere beneath all the irritation and competition and the constant need to prove her wrong, there was something else, something that made his chest tighten and his thoughts wander to dangerous places. When they separated outside Willow's, Alyssa called over her shoulder, "Try not to die of boredom with all that logic this week, Nicholas. Try not to cause any catastrophes with your impulsive decisions, Alyssa." She flipped him off with a smile, and he couldn't help the grin that tugged at his own lips as he watched her walk away, hips swaying in those dark jeans she wore, the autumn sunlight turning her hair to fire. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. "You know what your problem is, man. I'm sure you're about to tell me. You're in love with her." Nicholas's laugh was sharp, defensive. "That's ridiculous. We can't stand each other." But as he walked to his car, he couldn't shake the memory of how close they'd been at that table. Close enough to count her eyelashes, close enough to feel the warmth of her breath, close enough to want things he had no right to want. The tension was always there, simmering just below the surface, waiting. The party at Maya's house was in full swing when Nicholas arrived. The lights were low, music pulsed through the walls, and the smell of red wine and mixed perfumes hung in the air. He greeted a few friends, accepted a cold beer, and tried not to search for her with his eyes. Tried and failed. Alyssa was on the other side of the room, chatting animatedly with a group near the window. She wore a simple black dress that hugged her curves in a way that made his mouth go dry. Her hair was down, falling in waves over her bare shoulders. When she laughed at something someone said, throwing her head back, Nicholas felt that familiar irritation, mixed with something far more dangerous, settle in his chest. He looked away before she could notice him watching. "Everyone, let's play Truth or Dare," Maya announced, already visibly tipsy after a few glasses of wine. "Adult version, no being lame." There were laughs and some protests, but eventually the group gathered in a circle in the living room. Nicholas considered making up an excuse to leave, but something kept him there. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the way Alyssa had deliberately chosen to sit on the opposite side of the circle, as far from him as possible. The first few rounds were relatively innocent, embarrassing confessions, silly little dares. Nicholas answered his questions with calculated honesty, keeping the most vulnerable parts of himself guarded. Alyssa did the same, he noticed, though her eyes sparkled with amusement when someone was forced to do something ridiculous. Then Maya had an idea. Okay, I've got a better challenge, she said, her eyes gleaming with mischief. I'm going to randomly choose 2 people. They go into that room there, so she pointed to a small closet in the hallway. With the lights off. They have to stay in there for 5 minutes. Whatever happens in there, well, that's up to you. This is ridiculous, Nicholas muttered, but his voice was drowned out by the excited shouts of the others. Maya spun a bottle twice. The first one stopped pointing at Nicholas. The second spin seemed to happen in slow motion. Nicholas watched the bottle turn, until it finally stopped pointing directly at Alyssa. Their eyes met across the circle. For a moment, something passed between them. A flash of panic, of anticipation, of something unnamed. Perfect, Maya clapped. For you too. 5 minutes. And no, you can't refuse. Those are the rules. Maya, this is stupid, Alyssa began, but their friends were already pushing them both toward the hallway. It's just a game, Liz, Marcus said with a mischievous smile. What could happen in 5 minutes? The closet was smaller than Nicholas expected. When the door closed behind them and darkness swallowed them completely, he became acutely aware of how close they were. He could hear her breathing, feel the heat radiating from her body. This is ridiculous, Alyssa murmured, and he could tell from her voice that she was close, very close. They're so childish. I agree, Nicholas replied, keeping his voice steady despite his racing heart. We can just wait out the 5 minutes and... He moved to lean against the wall, but the darkness disoriented him. His foot caught on something, a box maybe, and he stumbled forward. His hands automatically reached out to steady himself, finding her shoulders. She gasped, her own hands flying up to grip his arms, and suddenly they were so close their noses nearly touched. Nicholas could feel her warm breath against his lips, a hint of mint and wine. Her vanilla perfume enveloped his senses, stronger here in the confined space, intoxicating. Sorry, he whispered, but he didn't pull away. He couldn't. It's okay, she breathed back, and there was something in her voice, something husky and low that made every nerve in his body ignite. Silence stretched between them, heavy and charged. Nicholas could feel her thumb pressing lightly against the inner curve of his elbow, a touch so light it could have been accidental. But then her thumb moved, just a fraction, tracing a small line on his skin, and he knew it wasn't an accident. His own thumb responded, sliding along the curve of her bare shoulder, feeling the soft, warm skin. She shivered under his touch, and the small sound that escaped her throat nearly undid him. Alyssa. He didn't know what he was trying to say. A warning? A plea? But then she leaned forward, or maybe it was him, and suddenly there was no more space between them. Their lips met in the dark, tentative, testing. For a second they both froze, shocked by their own boldness. Then something inside Nicholas broke. He pulled her closer, one hand sliding to the curve of her waist while the other buried itself in her hair. She responded immediately, her fingers curling into his shirt, pulling him against her until there was no space between their bodies. The kiss deepened, becoming something hungry, desperate. There were years of unresolved tension, denied desires, suppressed electricity, all exploding in that moment. Her mouth was hot and sweet, exactly as he'd imagined, but better, so much better. She tasted like promise and danger and everything he never knew he wanted. Her hands traveled up his back, nails lightly scratching through his shirt. He moaned softly against her lips and she responded by pressing herself harder against him, their bodies fitting together with a perfection that made his head spin. He spun her, pressing her gently against the wall, his lips leaving her mouth to trace a line of fire along her jaw, down her neck. She tilted her head back, giving him access, her fingers threading through his hair. Nicholas. She whispered his name like a prayer, like a curse, and the sound made something tighten painfully in his chest. He returned to her mouth, kissing her more deeply, his hands exploring the curve of her back, the bare skin of her shoulders, every inch he could reach. She arched against him, and the small moan that escaped her nearly made him lose control completely. The world had narrowed to this, to the taste of her on his tongue, to the sound of her quickened breathing, to the feeling of her warm, soft body pressed against his. Nothing else existed. Nothing else mattered. Then the door opened. Light flooded the small space like an explosion, blinding them. Nicholas and Alyssa broke apart abruptly, blinking against the brightness, gasping. For one horrible moment, they just stared at each other, their eyes adjusting to the light, the realization of what they'd done, of who they'd kissed, slowly settling in. Alyssa's eyes were wide, her lips swollen and red, her hair messed up where his hands had been. Nicholas knew he must look equally disheveled. He could feel her lipstick on his lips, her perfume soaked into his skin. "Oh my God," Maya said from the doorway, eyes wide. "Were you two—" "No," Alyssa said too quickly, too loud. She brushed past Nicholas without looking at him, stepping out of the closet. "Nothing happened, it was just claustrophobia. I need air." She disappeared down the hallway before Nicholas could say anything, before he could fully process what had happened. He ran his hand through his hair, trying to compose himself, ignoring the curious looks from their friends. His mouth still tingled with the taste of her. His body still vibrated with the memory of her touch. But by the time he finally managed to leave the hallway, Alyssa was already gone, and Nicholas stood there, in the middle of the loud party, feeling like something fundamental had shifted. Like a door that should never have been opened, could now never be completely closed again. The taste of that kiss, the feeling of that body against his, the way she'd whispered his name in the dark, it was all branded into him now, permanent, indelible. And he had no idea what to do with that. The days following the kiss were a kind of silent torture. Nicholas found himself thinking about it at inopportune moments, during work meetings, while reviewing architectural plans, in the middle of the night when he should be sleeping. The taste of Alyssa's lips, the feeling of her body pressed against his, the small sound she'd made when he kissed her neck, it all replayed in his mind on an infinite loop. They hadn't talked about the kiss. In fact, they'd barely talked at all. Alyssa responded to his messages in the group chat with generic emojis and avoided any direct conversation. Nicholas did the same, telling himself it was better this way, that it had just been a stupid mistake in an even stupider game. But then came dinner at Marcus's house. Nicholas arrived early, helping arrange the chairs around the long wooden table in the dining room. The aroma of garlic and rosemary floated from the kitchen, mixed with the sound of laughter and the clink of wine glasses. It was the kind of casual gathering their group did at least once a month. Nothing elaborate, just friends sharing food and stories. When Alyssa walked in, the air seemed to leave his lungs. She wore a dark green blouse that brought out the golden tones in her eyes, fitted jeans that hugged her legs, and had her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail that left a few strands framing her face. When her eyes met his across the room, she froze for just a second before quickly looking away. "Liz!" Maya pulled her into a hug. "I thought you weren't coming." "I thought about not coming," Alyssa admitted, her voice low but audible enough for Nicholas to hear. "But I'm not going to let—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Uncomfortable situations keep me from seeing my friends." Fate, or maybe Maya being Maya, meant that the only available seats when everyone sat down for dinner were side by side. Nicholas slid into the chair, hyper-aware of every inch of space between them, or rather the lack of space. The table was too full, crowded with plates, serving dishes of food, wine bottles. Their shoulders touched inevitably, his thigh pressed against hers. Every small movement sent waves of awareness through his body. Alyssa picked up her wine glass, her fingers trembling almost imperceptibly. Nicholas noticed. He noticed everything about her now. Every breath, every movement, every subtle shift in her expression. "So, Nicholas," Rachel said from across the table, "how's the new clinic project? I heard you're redesigning the entire accessibility structure." He cleared his throat, forcing himself to focus. "It's going well. It's been an interesting challenge thinking about all the different types of needs patients might have. It's an important project," Alyssa said suddenly, her voice steady but loaded with something he couldn't identify. A lot of clinics completely ignore the needs of patients with reduced mobility or other limitations. It's about dignity, not just functionality. Nicholas turned to look at her, surprised by the contribution. Their eyes met, and for a moment they forgot where they were. There was something in her eyes, passion, conviction, that always drew him in even when they were arguing. "Exactly," he said softly. That's why every detail matters. It's not just about ramps and wide doors. It's about thinking about how each space makes people feel. You really understand that? She sounded genuinely curious, almost surprised. I try, he replied, and there was honesty in his voice that he rarely showed. Not everything can be solved with formulas and regulations. Sometimes, he hesitated, then continued, sometimes you need to feel the space, imagine what it would be like to be in it. Something shifted in her face. The tension in her shoulders relaxed minimally. That's surprisingly thoughtful for someone so logical. And that's surprisingly generous for someone so what? She tilted her head, and there was a playful challenge in her eyes now, mixed with something warmer. So quick to judge me, he finished, but there was a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Maybe you give me plenty of reasons to judge, she shot back, but her own smile was starting to appear. They were doing it again, that familiar verbal dance, but something was different now. The words had a softer quality, the looks lasted longer, and under the table, invisible to everyone else, Nicholas's thigh still pressed against hers, and neither of them pulled away. When Alyssa reached for the salt, her fingers brushed his. They both froze. The touch was electric, sending sparks shooting up his arm. She pulled her hand back quickly, but not before he saw goosebumps rise on her skin. "Excuse me," she murmured, picking up the napkin that had slipped into his lap by mistake. Their hands met again, this time intentionally. Her fingers curled around his for just 1 second, 2, 3. Nicholas held his breath, his heart pounding so loud he was sure she could hear it. When she finally pulled the napkin and her hand back, their eyes met. The entire table was talking, laughing, eating, completely oblivious to the silent storm happening between them. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice so low only he could hear. He wasn't sure what she was thanking him for. For the napkin, for not mentioning the kiss, for that brief but meaningful touch. "You're welcome," he replied equally quietly, and there were layers of meaning in those two simple words. The conversation flowed around them, but Nicholas could barely keep up. All his awareness was focused on the woman beside him, on the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking, a gesture he now knew meant she was slightly nervous, on how she bit her lower lip before speaking, something that made his mouth tingle with memories. When she laughed at something Marcus said, her head tilted slightly toward Nicholas, as if unconsciously seeking his proximity. And when she picked up her wineglass, he noticed her fingers trembled almost imperceptibly. She was just as affected as he was. The meal continued. At some point, the conversation turned to a debate about the best type of Italian pasta. Nicholas and Alyssa predictably disagreed. "Penne is clearly superior," she insisted, her eyes sparkling. "It holds the sauce better." "That's ridiculous. Linguine has superior texture and..." "Texture?" She turned completely toward him now, knee pressing against his thigh. "You're actually arguing about pasta texture. You started it," he pointed out, leaning closer. He could feel the heat radiating from her, smell the vanilla perfume mixed with a hint of red wine on her breath. "No, you started it by being stubborn about this," she retorted, but there was a smile playing on her lips. "Me? Stubborn? You're literally the most stubborn person I know. And yet," she said softly, so softly only he could hear, "you can't stop looking at me." The comment caught him completely off guard. His heart skipped a beat. "I could say the same about you." She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. Her cheeks flushed slightly and she looked away, picking up her wineglass and taking a long sip. But under the table, her foot brushed against his. It could have been accidental. But when she didn't pull away, when their feet remained touching, Nicholas knew it wasn't. The rest of dinner passed in a fog of hyper-awareness. Every accidental touch, and Nicholas was beginning to suspect that not all of them were quite so accidental, sent electricity through him. The way her arm brushed against his when she gestured while talking, the moment she leaned over to pass the breadbasket and her shoulder pressed against his chest, the way their fingers met when they both reached for the wine bottle at the same time. When dessert was served, Nicholas picked up his fork and inadvertently dropped it on the floor. He bent down to get it at the same time as Alyssa, and their hands met under the table. This time, neither of them let go immediately. Their fingers intertwined briefly, thumbs tracing small circles on each other's palms. The touch was too intimate, too significant to be accidental. Nicholas could feel her pulse racing where her fingers pressed against his wrist. When they finally emerged from under the table, napkin and fork in hand, they were both breathing faster. Their eyes met, and in that look, passed everything they couldn't say out loud. I feel it too. I remember. I want. The evening eventually ended. Guests began saying their goodbyes, thanking Marcus for the wonderful meal. Nicholas stood helping clear some plates, trying to appear casual despite the turmoil inside him. At the door, Alyssa was putting on her coat. He approached, not really thinking, just gravitating toward her like he always did now. "Alyssa," he said quietly. She turned, and they were so close he could see the tiny gold flecks in her hazel eyes. Yes, he didn't know what he wanted to say. "Sorry? I can't stop thinking about you. That kiss changed everything?" "Drive safely," he finally said, and it sounded stupid even to his own ears. But she smiled, a small, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "You too, Nicholas." She brushed past him, and at the last second her fingers grazed his. On purpose this time, definitely on purpose. And Nicholas stood in the doorway, watching her taillights disappear into the night, knowing with absolute certainty that something had shifted between them. The teasing was still there, but now it carried a different weight. The looks lasted much longer. And the touches. The touches were starting to mean everything. Maya's call came on a Tuesday afternoon, while Nicholas was reviewing blueprints at the office. He answered distractedly, still focused on the structural load calculations in front of him. "I need a huge favor," Maya said without preamble. "Remember that community clinic that serves patients with special needs? They need a complete accessibility renovation, and I recommended you as the volunteer engineer." Nicholas paused, his pen suspended in the air. "Maya, I'm in the middle of 3 commercial projects and you said yourself that you wanted to do more community work this year," she interrupted. "Besides, you'll love this. It's exactly the kind of challenge that motivates you. Small spaces, lots of constraints, creative solutions needed." He sighed. Maya knew him too well. "Fine. When do you need me to start?" "Actually, you won't be working alone. I'll need you to collaborate with someone who knows the patient's needs from the inside." Something in her tone made Nicholas sit up straight in his chair. "Maya, who is it?" "Alyssa works there 3 times a week as an occupational therapist. She knows every patient, every specific need. You two together would be perfect for this project." Nicholas closed his eyes. Of course it would be her. "Maya, I don't think I already confirmed with her." She agreed. There was a note of satisfaction in Maya's voice that made Nicholas suspect this was more than just a volunteer project. "First meeting is Thursday at 3 in the afternoon at the clinic. Don't let me down, Nick." She hung up before he could protest. Hope Clinic was housed in a low brick building in a quiet area of the city. Nicholas arrived 15 minutes early, an old habit, with his work bag and tablet. The interior was welcoming but clearly outdated, with narrow hallways, heavy doors, and steps where there should be ramps. He was examining the entrance when he heard footsteps behind him. "Punctual as always," Alyssa's voice said. He turned. She wore navy blue medical scrubs that somehow still managed to highlight her curves. Her hair was pulled back in a practical bun, a few rebellious strands escaping around her face. She held a clipboard against her chest like a shield. "Alyssa," he said, and he hated how his voice sounded hoarse. He cleared his throat. "Maya called me about the project." "She called me too." Alyssa approached, maintaining a professional distance between them. "Look, I know this might be awkward, but this place really needs help, and Maya was right. You're good at what you do, and I know the patients. We can be professional about this, right?" "Of course," Nicholas agreed quickly. Professional. They could do this. "Show me what needs to be changed." The next 2 hours were a revelation. Alyssa guided him through the clinic, pointing out problems he never would have noticed on his own. The way Mrs. Chen, who used a walker, had to make a complete loop to enter the physical therapy room because the door opened inward. How young Marcus, not their friend but an 8-year-old boy in a wheelchair, couldn't reach the water fountain. How the texture of the main hallway floor confused Mr. Rodriguez, who was visually impaired. Nicholas took notes frantically, but more than that, he watched. He watched the way Alyssa's face lit up when she talked about her patients, the passion in her voice when she described their struggles and triumphs, the gentle way she touched the wall near the waiting room, as if she could feel the needs of the space through her fingertips. "You really love this," he said softly, when they paused in a small conference room. She looked at him, surprised. "I do. These people, they just want to live their lives with dignity. That's not asking too much." "It's not," he agreed. Then, before he could censor himself, he added, "It's one of the things I—" He stopped, realizing what he was about to say. "One of the things you what?" She stepped closer, her head tilted curiously. "Admire about you," he wanted to say. "One of the things that makes me want to know you beyond our fights. One of the things that makes this project important," he finished lamely. Something passed across her face, disappointment maybe, but she just nodded. "Right. So, where do we start?" Days turned into weeks. They met at the clinic too, sometimes 3 times a week. Nicholas arrived with new sketches, ideas for maximizing space and accessibility within the tight budget. Alyssa brought insights from the patients, sometimes bringing the patients themselves to test a prototype or give feedback. And slowly, inevitably, the dynamic between them began to shift. At first they kept conversations strictly professional, but it was impossible to spend that much time together without fragments of their personal lives starting to leak through. Nicholas casually mentioned his father, who had worked in construction and taught him to appreciate well-designed spaces. Alyssa talked about her grandmother, who'd had a stroke and whose struggle with accessibility inspired her career choice. "She used to say the world wasn't built for people like her," Alyssa shared on a rainy afternoon, while they reviewed blueprints spread across the table. "As if she wasn't part of the world. That always made me furious." Nicholas looked at her, seeing vulnerability she rarely showed. "That's why you care so much. It's not just work for you." "It never was," she admitted. Her eyes met his, and in that moment, he saw past the defenses, past the teasing, straight to her heart. Without thinking, he covered her hand with his on the table. "Let's make this place perfect for her, for all of them." Alyssa looked at their hands, connected over the architectural drawings. She didn't pull back. Instead, her fingers curved slightly, almost but not quite intertwining with his. "Thank you, Nicholas," she whispered. They stayed like that for a long moment, hands touching, eyes locked on each other, the rain drumming softly against the windows, creating an intimate soundtrack. Then the door opened and a nurse walked in. They separated quickly, returning to the drawings with exaggerated intensity. But something had shifted. Nicholas began to notice small changes. He'd arrive for their work sessions and find a coffee waiting for him. Black, no sugar, exactly how he liked it. Alyssa never mentioned it, just shrugged when he thanked her, saying the coffee machine was on the way anyway. So he started reciprocating. He discovered she had a weakness for blueberry muffins from the bakery near his office. He started bringing them, casually leaving them on the table before she arrived. The first time she looked at the muffin, then at him, and a slow, genuine smile spread across her face, the kind of smile that made his heart do somersaults. "You remembered," she said softly. "You mentioned it once," he replied, as if he hadn't driven 20 minutes out of his way to get it. The notes started after that. Nicholas would review the drawings and find little post-its in her cursive handwriting. "What if we moved this wall about 6 inches? It would give Mrs. Chen's walker room to turn." Or, "Loved this ramp solution. You're more creative than you admit." He started responding. Small observations in the corners of the drawings. "Good idea. You were right, this time." Or, "Thank you for trusting me with this." It was a silent conversation happening parallel to their verbal discussions. More honest in a way, more intimate. One afternoon, while measuring the main hallway, Alyssa tripped on a loose cable. Nicholas caught her instinctively, arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her against his chest. She gasped, hands gripping his shoulders to steady herself. They froze like that, bodies pressed together, faces inches apart. Nicholas could feel her heart beating against his chest. Or was it his? Impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice coming out rough. "I am," she whispered, but she didn't pull away. Her eyes dropped to his lips, then quickly back to his eyes. "Thank you for catching me." "Always," the word came out before he could think, loaded with more meaning than he'd intended. Her fingers tightened on his shoulders. She leaned closer, just a fraction, and Nicholas felt his resolve crumbling. It would be so easy to close that small distance, taste those lips again. "Alyssa!" A nurse's voice echoed down the hallway. "Phone for you." They broke apart abruptly. Alyssa smoothed her clothes, cheeks flushed. "I need to get that." She hurried off, leaving Nicholas standing in the hallway, heart thundering, body vibrating with the memory of her touch. This was becoming impossible to ignore. The following week, working late on a Friday, they were alone in the clinic. All the patients had gone home, the staff reduced to just the night security guard up front. The conference room was lit only by the desk lamp, creating a warm bubble of light around them as they finalized the last set of drawings. Nicholas stretched, rolling his shoulders to ease the tension. Without thinking, Alyssa reached out and touched his shoulder. "You're tense," she observed. He froze under her touch. Bad posture, too much time hunched over drawings. Her fingers moved, gently massaging the tight muscle. "You should take better care of yourself." Nicholas closed his eyes, trying not to think about how her hands felt like magic, how each touch sent warmth coursing through him. "You work too hard too." "We both do," she murmured. Her hands moved to his other shoulder, and he couldn't contain the small groan of relief. You don't have to." "I know," she said softly, "but I want to." He turned in his chair, looking up at her. The movement brought her closer, until she was practically between his knees. Her hands still rested on his shoulders, and now their faces were level, eyes meeting in the soft light. "Why are you doing all this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "The coffee, the notes, this—" Alyssa hesitated, her fingers tracing absent patterns along his collar. "Because you matter to me. More than you should." His heart stopped. "Alyssa—" "I know," she interrupted. "We spent years teasing each other, arguing. But these past few weeks—" She paused, searching for words. "Seeing you work, seeing how much you care about getting it right, how you really listen when I talk about the patients. I see you now, Nicholas. The real you." He reached up, taking one of her hands, intertwining their fingers. "I see you too. I always have. That's why I always teased you so much. Because I didn't know how to deal with you any other way. You scared me," he admitted. "You still do." She slid her free hand to the curve of his face, thumb tracing his jaw. "Why?" "Because you make me feel things I swore I didn't feel. Because when I'm around you, I forget all my careful rules. Because I can't stop thinking about that kiss, even knowing I should." Her breathing became uneven. "I can't stop thinking about it either." They were so close now, breaths mingling, eyes locked. Nicholas brought his free hand to her hip, resting it there lightly. "Tell me to stop." "What if I don't want you to stop?" she whispered. It was all he needed to hear. This time, when their lips met, it wasn't frantic like in the closet. It was slow, deliberate, each touch meaning something. His lips moved against hers tenderly, savoring, memorizing. She sighed against his mouth, fingers sliding into his hair, and he pulled her closer, deepening the kiss. It was sweet and warm and absolutely perfect. When they finally pulled apart, breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "This changes everything," he whispered. "I know," she replied, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw down his neck. "I'm terrified." "Me too." He kissed her nose, her cheeks, her eyelid. "But I can't pretend anymore." "Neither can I." They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in each other in the soft light, the outside world forgotten, just the two of them and the truth finally spoken between them. Everything had changed, and neither of them knew where it would lead. But for the first time, they were willing to find out. The final presentation of the clinic's accessibility project was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon. Nicholas and Alyssa had worked tirelessly over the past few weeks, refining every detail, ensuring every need was met. What had started as a simple volunteer project had transformed into something much bigger. Not just for the clinic, but for them. They were different now, softer with each other. Touches lasted longer. Looks carried unspoken promises. But they still hadn't defined what they were, this fragile and new thing growing between them. It was like holding something precious and terrifying at the same time, neither wanting to be the first to name it, afraid that talking about it might break it. The presentation was a success. The clinic director, Dr. Santos, a woman with graying hair and kind eyes, looked at the final plans, with tears shining. "This is more than we could have dreamed," she said, voice thick. "You didn't just solve the problems, you created a space that honors our patients. Thank you." Nicholas and Alyssa exchanged a look across the conference table. In that look was everything, shared pride, joy, and something deeper that neither was ready to name out loud. After everyone left, after the congratulations ended and the documents were filed, they stood alone in the conference room for the last time. The sun was setting, casting golden and pink light through the windows. "It's over," Alyssa said softly, and there was something in her voice beyond simple observation. A question, perhaps. "What happens to us now that the project is done?" "It doesn't have to be," Nicholas replied. He moved closer to her, leaving only a few inches between them. "Alyssa, these past few weeks—" "I know," she interrupted, looking up, meeting his eyes. "For me too." He reached up, taking a strand of hair that had escaped from her bun, gently twirling it between his fingers before delicately tucking it behind her ear. The touch was intimate, familiar, and he saw her eyes close briefly at the contact. "Come with me," he said impulsively. "Just for an hour. There's something I want to show you." She hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Okay." Nicholas led her to the clinic's rooftop, a space that was rarely used, accessible by a narrow staircase at the end of the hallway. He'd discovered it during one of his early inspections, a small forgotten oasis atop the building with a view of the city. When he opened the door, Alyssa gasped. The sky was transforming into a masterpiece of colors, deep oranges bleeding into pinks, purples melting into blues. The city stretched below them, lights beginning to flicker like earthbound stars. A gentle breeze carried the scent of jasmine from some nearby garden, mixing with the cool air of approaching night. "Nicholas," she whispered, turning slowly to take it all in. "It's beautiful." "I thought of you when I found this place," he admitted, standing behind her close enough to feel her warmth but not touching. "Not yet. The way you see beauty in spaces, how you transform places into sanctuaries for people. This place felt fitting." She turned to face him, and the sunset light caught her face in gold and rose tones, making her eyes shimmer. "You thought of me?" "I always think of you," he confessed, voice rough with honesty. "Even when I tried not to. Especially then." Alyssa took one step closer, then another, until she was directly in front of him. "Why did you always tease me so much?" It was the question she'd asked in the dark closet weeks ago, but this time they were in the light, vulnerable and exposed, and the answer mattered more. Nicholas reached up, fingers gently tracing the line of her jaw, down her neck until they rested on her wrist, where he could feel her quickened pulse. "Because I didn't know how to handle what I feel for you." She took his wrist, her fingers wrapping gently around it, thumb pressing where his own pulse beat strong. "And now?" "Now," he said, bringing his other hand to her face, fingers sliding along her cheek. "I still don't know, but I don't want to run from it anymore." Her eyes locked on his, searching, reading the truth in every word. Then, slowly, she leaned closer, giving him all the time in the world to pull away. He didn't pull away. When their lips met, it was different from before. There was no frantic urgency like in the closet, no nervous hesitation like in the office. This was deliberate, conscious, a choice they were both making with open eyes. Nicholas slid his hand from her cheek to the nape of her neck, fingers threading through her hair as he deepened the kiss. She responded immediately, arms wrapping around his neck, body pressing against his, as she surrendered completely to the moment. The world disappeared. There was nothing except the feeling of her lips against his, the taste of mint tea on her tongue, the vanilla perfume enveloping his senses. Their bodies fit together perfectly, as if they'd been molded for each other. When they finally pulled apart, They were both breathing heavily. Nicholas rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed, just feeling. "This is real," Alyssa whispered, more statement than question. "Very real," he confirmed, opening his eyes to find hers. "And scary. Terrifying," she agreed, but she was smiling. Her fingers played with the hair at the nape of his neck, tracing small patterns that sent shivers down his spine. Nicholas guided her to the low parapet that circled the rooftop, where they could sit side by side, looking out over the city as the sun finished its descent. He pulled her close, arm wrapping around her shoulders, and she nestled against his chest, head resting on his shoulder. "Tell me something no one knows about you," she requested softly, fingers tracing absent patterns over his chest. Nicholas thought for a moment, internally debating how vulnerable he was willing to be. Then he decided that with her, he wanted to be completely honest. "When I was 10, my dad had a work accident," he began, voice low. "He was in a wheelchair for almost a year during recovery. I saw how the world changed for him overnight. Places he used to go easily suddenly became impossible obstacles. People looked at him differently, spoke slower as if he couldn't understand." Alyssa pressed closer against him, hand flattening over his heart. "It's part of why I became an engineer," he continued. "I wanted to build spaces that didn't exclude people, that didn't make anyone feel less human for existing differently." She turned her head, gently kissing his neck. "You never told me that." "I never told anyone. My dad doesn't like to talk about it, so we don't." He looked down, meeting her eyes. "But I want you to know. I want you to really know me." "I want that too," she whispered. Then, taking a deep breath, she added, "My grandmother died on my 18th birthday. We'd planned a big celebration, but she had another stroke the night before. I spent my birthday in the hospital, holding her hand, telling her about all the places we'd make accessible together." Nicholas pulled her tighter against him, kissing the top of her head. "I'm so sorry. She made me promise I'd live for both of us, that I'd never let fear stop me from fighting for what mattered." Alyssa looked up, eyes bright but not spilling tears. "But I'm so scared of this, Nicholas, of you, of what this could mean." "Me too," he admitted, taking her hand, intertwining their fingers. "But maybe some fears are worth facing." She squeezed his hand, bringing their intertwined fingers to her lips and kissing his knuckles. "Maybe they are." They stayed like that as the sky darkened completely, stars beginning to appear one by one. The city below them pulsed with life, cars honking, distant voices, music leaking from some open window. But up here, it was just the two of them, wrapped in comfortable silence and the revelation of shared truths. Nicholas played with her fingers, tracing each line, each knuckle, memorizing the feeling of her hand in his. Alyssa watched, fascinated by the tenderness in his touches, by the way he treated every inch of her like something precious. "I used to hate when you did this," she said softly. "Did what?" "Watched me. Noticed things about me. The way you always knew when I was upset before anyone else, or how you'd notice when I changed my hair, even if it was just a few inches." Nicholas smiled against her hair. "I couldn't help it. You've always been magnetic to me. Even when we were arguing. Especially then." He turned her slightly so they could look at each other properly. "You're beautiful when you're passionate about something. Your eyes sparkle, your cheeks flush, you gesture with your hands without even realizing it. I'd provoke you just to see it." She laughed, a soft musical sound that made his heart clench. "That's terribly manipulative." "Desperate," he corrected. "I was desperate for any version of you I could have, even if it was just arguments." Alyssa reached up, sliding her hand along the side of his face, thumb tracing his lower lip. Nicholas closed his eyes at the touch, turning his head slightly to kiss her palm. "And now," she asked, "what version of me do you want now?" He opened his eyes, meeting hers with an intensity that made her catch her breath. "All of them. Every version, every mood, every moment. I want the woman who argues with me about Italian pasta, and the one who cries for her patience. I want the one who laughs at Marcus's bad jokes, and the one who gets serious when she's focused. I want everything, Alyssa." A single tear escaped, sliding down her cheek. He caught it with his thumb, gently wiping it away. "Why are you crying?" "Because no one has ever Her voice failed. No one has ever wanted me like this. Completely. Without trying to change the parts they find difficult. I love the difficult parts, he confessed. They make you you, and you are... He paused, searching for the right word. Extraordinary. She leaned forward, capturing his lips in a kiss that was salt and sweet at the same time. Her hands framed his face, holding him like he was something precious, something hers. And maybe, he thought as he kissed her back, he was. When they pulled apart, she kept her face close to his, noses almost touching, breaths mingling. Nicholas? Yes? I don't want this to end when we leave this rooftop. His heart jumped. Neither do I. So what do we do? He took both her hands, bringing them to his chest where she could feel his heart beating. We try, for real. No more teasing as defense, no more hiding what we feel. That terrifies me, she admitted. I'll be terrified with you, he promised. She laughed through more tears, and he kissed them away, each one, until she was smiling again. They stayed on the rooftop until the stars were bright overhead, until the air got too cold for comfort, until they could no longer ignore the world waiting below. But when they finally went back down, something fundamental had changed. They were together now. Not perfectly, not without fear, but together. And as Nicholas held her hand going down the stairs, fingers intertwined firmly, he knew he was falling. He'd been falling for years, actually, just fighting too hard against it. Now finally, he was ready to let go. And from the smile on Alyssa's face when she looked back at him, she was ready too. The week following the rooftop was like living in a delicate, shimmering bubble. Nicholas and Alyssa exchanged messages every hour, small, meaningless things that somehow meant everything. Breakfast photos, traffic complaints, silly memes only they would understand, and sometimes, late at night, deeper messages, thinking about you. Can't stop smiling. When can I see you again? They met for quick lunches between work commitments, stealing hurried kisses in empty parking lots, holding hands under restaurant tables. It was new and scary and absolutely addictive, but they still hadn't defined what they were, still hadn't told their friends. It hung in that liminal space between secret and reality, fragile and precious. Then came Friday's happy hour. Maya had organized drinks at their usual bar, a cozy place with soft lighting and live music. Nicholas arrived late, straight from a client meeting, tie loosened and sleeves rolled up. He saw Alyssa immediately. She wore an emerald green dress that hugged every curve, hair loose in waves falling over bare shoulders. But she wasn't alone. There was a man beside her at the bar, tall, tan, easy smile. He leaned too close, hand resting casually on the bar behind her, effectively caging her in. And Alyssa was laughing at something he said, head tilted back, exposing the elegant line of her neck. Something dark and possessive roared in Nicholas's chest. He approached, jaw tight, trying to maintain composure. Marcus saw him first. "Nick, finally," he waved. "Come meet Derek. He works with Alyssa at the clinic. Just moved to the city." Derek extended his hand, smile confident. "Good to meet you. I've heard a lot about your group." Nicholas shook his hand harder than necessary. "Nicholas." Alyssa finally looked at him, and something passed across her face, surprise, pleasure, and maybe a touch of guilt. But she quickly masked it with a casual smile. "Hi, Nicholas. Thought you weren't coming." "I said I would," he replied, voice sharper than intended. She blinked, confusion crossing her face. "Are you okay?" "Perfectly," he lied, ordering a beer from the bartender. The evening proceeded torturously. Derek seemed glued to Alyssa, making her laugh with work stories, touching her arm to emphasize points, leaning conspiratorially close when the bar got loud. And Alyssa. Alyssa was being polite, friendly, nothing beyond appropriate. But to Nicholas, every laugh felt like betrayal. Every touch burned. Every second she didn't look in his direction felt like an eternity. He tried to distract himself talking to Marcus about the weekend football game, but his eyes kept drifting to her. And every time they did, Derek was there, smiling, charming, invading the space Nicholas was beginning to think of as his. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. "I need air," he muttered to Marcus, leaving before anyone could respond. The night air was cold, a blessing against his heated face. He leaned against the bar's wall, hands shoved in his pockets, trying to process the storm of emotions inside him. He had no right to feel this way. They hadn't defined anything. They weren't officially together. She was free to flirt with whoever she wanted, but that didn't make it hurt less. "Nicholas?" He turned. Alyssa stood in the doorway, hugging herself against the cold expression, concerned. "What's going on with you?" she asked. "You've been weird all night." "Nothing," he said curtly. "Go back inside. I'm sure Derek's waiting for you." Her eyes narrowed. "Excuse me? You two seem to be having fun." "I don't want to interrupt." "You're jealous," she said, and there was surprise in her voice, not disapproval, not anger, surprise. "What if I am?" The words came out before he could stop them. "What if I hate seeing another man making you laugh, touching you, standing so close to you, I can see it from where I am?" Alyssa took a step closer. "Nicholas, I know I have no right," he continued, the dam finally breaking. "We're nothing official. We haven't told anyone. Maybe to you this is just, I don't know, something casual, but for me..." "For you what?" she pressed, now directly in front of him. He looked at her, eyes bright in the streetlight, lips slightly parted, body trembling slightly with cold. And all his careful resistance crumbled. "For me it means everything," he admitted hoarsely. "You mean everything." Her face softened. She reached up, fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "Derek is just a co-worker, a friend maybe. Nothing more. He wants more." "Maybe," she conceded, "but I don't. Because, in case you haven't noticed, I'm completely obsessed with a stubborn, irritating engineer who used to drive me crazy." "Used to?" He caught her hand against his face, turning his head to kiss her palm. "Still does," she corrected, smiling. "Just in a different way now." Nicholas pulled her closer, hands finding her waist. "Alyssa, I need to know. What is this? Between us?" She hesitated, and he saw fear pass through her eyes. "I don't know. It's too scary to name. Scary because it means nothing, or scary because it means too much." "Because it means too much," she whispered. "Because if I admit what I'm feeling, if I name this, then it becomes real. And if it becomes real, I could lose it. I could lose you." He held her face with both hands, forcing her to look at him. "You won't lose me. Not if you don't want to. What if I mess everything up? What if my impulsive decisions and your need for control end this before it even really begins? Then we'll fight," he said fiercely. "We'll argue and find compromises and learn. But Alyssa, I need you to choose this. Choose us. Because I can't pretend anymore that you're just anything less than everything." Tears shone in her eyes. "You're right for me, Nicholas. Despite all our differences, despite all the years teasing each other, you're right for me." "Then let me be yours," he pleaded. "Officially. No more hiding, no more pretending this is casual." "And that guy in there?" she asked, a small smile playing on her lips despite the tears. "Isn't he right for me?" Nicholas pulled her against him abruptly, one hand sliding to the curve of her back while the other buried itself in her hair. "No," he growled against her lips. "He's definitely not right." Then he kissed her, hard and possessive, and completely uninhibited. Her arms wrapped around his neck immediately, body pressing against his, as she responded with equal ferocity. The kiss was fire and hunger, weeks of tension and need pouring out in one breathtaking moment. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathless. Nicholas rested his forehead against hers, thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "Come with me," he whispered. "Now. I don't want to go back in there. I don't want to share you with anyone else tonight." "Where?" she asked, but she was already nodding, already intertwining her fingers with his. "My apartment. I just need to be alone with you. Really alone." She studied his face for a long moment, reading the raw need there, the barely contained desire. Then she pulled out her phone, typing quickly. "I'm telling everyone I'm not feeling well and going home." "Alyssa, and you," she continued, eyes meeting his with heat that made his stomach clench, "are taking me home. To your home." They barely made it into his apartment before hands were exploring again. Nicholas pressed her against the closed door, lips finding hers in a kiss that was pure need. Her hands traveled up his back, pulling his shirt from his pants, fingers sliding beneath the fabric to find warm skin. He groaned against her mouth, hands sliding down the sides of her body, feeling every curve through the thin dress. When he reached the hem just above her knees, he hesitated. "Alyssa, if you want to stop." "I don't want to stop," she gasped, pulling him into another deep kiss. "Not tonight." He guided her to the couch, bodies intertwined, hands exploring with growing urgency. Every touch ignited more fire, every kiss deepened the need. Nicholas slid the straps of her dress over her shoulders, lips following the path, kissing every inch of exposed skin. Alyssa arched against him, fingers curling in his hair, small sounds of pleasure escaping her throat. He drank in every sound, memorized every reaction, learned exactly what made her tremble. His hands found the zipper at the back of her dress, fingers hesitating. He looked up, meeting her eyes, asking silent permission. She nodded, and he slowly, so slowly, pulled the zipper down, revealing the creamy skin beneath. She sat up slightly, letting the dress fall to her waist, and Nicholas felt his breath catch. She was absolutely beautiful. "You're staring," she whispered, cheeks flushing slightly. "I can't help it," he replied honestly. "You're perfect." She reached out, unbuttoning his shirt with fingers that trembled slightly. When she opened it completely, she pushed the fabric over his shoulders, revealing his muscular chest, defined abdomen. She slid her hands over his skin, feeling the warmth, the muscles contracting under her touch. "To you too," she murmured, leaning forward to kiss his chest, tongue tracing patterns that made him groan. They moved together, clothes falling away, until there were no more barriers between them. Nicholas held her face, looking deeply into her eyes. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything," she replied, pulling him down until their bodies aligned perfectly. What followed was both frantic and tender. Hands explored, lips tasted, bodies moved in perfect synchronicity. Nicholas whispered her name like a prayer, and Alyssa responded with soft moans that drove him further. When they finally joined completely, they both gasped at the same time, eyes locked, seeing each other in ways they'd never seen anyone before. They moved together slowly at first, savoring every sensation, then faster as need grew. "Nicholas!" she gasped, nails scratching his back, legs wrapping around his waist. "I know, baby, I know," he murmured against her neck, hands gripping her hips, guiding her with him. When they reached climax, it was together, each other's names on their lips, bodies trembling with the force of it. Nicholas collapsed beside her, immediately pulling her into his arms, unable to bear even inches of separation. They stayed like that for long minutes, breaths calming, hearts returning to normal rhythm. Nicholas played with her fingers, intertwining and untwining them, while she drew absent patterns on his chest. "That wasn't just sex," she finally said, voice quiet but firm. He kissed her forehead, pulling her tighter against him. "Not for a second. It never could be just that. Not with you." She turned her head, looking up at him. "So what are we?" He smiled, cupping her face gently. "We're Nicholas and Alyssa, finally stopping fighting this. Finally being honest about what we've always wanted." "And what have we always wanted?" "Each other," he said simply, "in every possible way." She smiled, and it was the most genuine, most radiant smile he'd ever seen from her. "I can live with that." "Good," he murmured, pulling her into another kiss. "Because I'm not letting you go. Not ever." And as they lay intertwined under the blanket, city glittering through the windows, they both knew they'd crossed a threshold from which there was no return. But neither of them wanted to go back. They were exactly where they should be. The following weeks were like living in a dream. Nicholas and Alyssa had finally stopped hiding what they felt, at least when they were alone. They still hadn't made a big announcement to their friends. Part of them wanted to keep it just theirs for a little longer, protect that precious bubble before the real world invaded. They saw each other whenever they could. Impromptu dinners at his apartment, Sunday walks in the park, nights spent talking until dawn, discovering layers of each other that had remained hidden for years. Nicholas discovered that Alyssa was afraid of storms, because of a tornado that nearly destroyed her grandmother's house when she was a child. Alyssa learned that Nicholas read poetry late at night when he couldn't sleep, something he'd never admitted to anyone. They were truly getting to know each other, and the more they knew, the more they fell in love. But life had a way of testing even the most perfect moments. It was a Thursday evening when Alyssa's phone rang. Nicholas was in her kitchen preparing pasta for dinner. He'd insisted on demonstrating that linguine was, in fact, superior to her penne when he heard her voice change in the living room. "How much time does she have?" Alyssa asked, voice tense. A pause. "I understand. Yes, I'll be there early tomorrow morning. Thank you for letting me know." Nicholas turned off the stove, drying his hands as he walked to the living room. Alyssa sat on the couch, phone dropped in her lap, staring at nothing. "Hey," he said softly, sitting beside her. "What happened?" "Mrs. Chen," Alyssa whispered, and her voice broke. "She had a stroke. She's in the hospital. They don't think she'll make it through the night." Nicholas knew Mrs. Chen from the clinic project, a woman in her 70s, always smiling despite chronic pain, always grateful for every small improvement they made to her space. Alyssa had spoken of her so fondly, shared stories of her resilience, her humor. "Alyssa, I'm so sorry," he said, pulling her into his arms. She collapsed against his chest, and he felt tears soaking his shirt. "I knew it was coming. She'd been so fragile lately. But I wasn't ready. I'm never ready." He held her tighter, hand tracing gentle circles on her back. "You don't need to be ready. Just feel." "I try to keep professional distance," she continued, voice muffled against him. "Try not to get too attached, but she reminded me so much of my grandmother, you know? The way she laughed, how she insisted on calling me dear." "Hey, look at me," Nicholas said gently, catching her chin and guiding her face up. Her eyes were red, cheeks streaked with tears. She looked small and lost in a way that broke his heart. "You caring isn't a weakness," he said firmly. "It's what makes you incredible at what you do. These people feel like they matter because you make them matter. Don't change that." She sobbed, a fresh wave of tears falling. "Sometimes it's too much. Loving so much, losing so much." "I know," he murmured, pulling her back into his arms, kissing her hair. "I know, baby." They stayed like that for a long time, Nicholas holding her while she cried, offering the only comfort he could, his presence, his solidity, his silent love. Eventually, the tears subsided. Alyssa pulled back slightly, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "Sorry," she said, voice hoarse. "I ruined our dinner." "Don't be ridiculous," he replied, grabbing a tissue from the coffee table and gently drying the remaining tears. "Dinner can wait. You're more important." She looked at him, something shifting in her expression. "Nicholas, you don't have to stay. I know you had work." "Stop," he interrupted. "There's nowhere I'd rather be than here, with you. Even when I'm a mess. Especially when you're a mess," he said with a small smile. "Because you've been there for me in my worst moments. Now it's my turn." She blinked, confused. "When was I there in your worst moments?" "All those times you teased me when I was being too rigid, too controlling. You didn't realize it, but you were pulling me out of my own head, forcing me to be present," he admitted. "You balanced me before we even knew that's what was happening." New tears filled her eyes. But these were different. "How do you always know exactly what to say?" "Because I pay attention to you," he said simply. "Because you matter more to me than anything." Alyssa leaned in, capturing his lips in a kiss that was salt and tenderness. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "Stay with me tonight," she whispered. "I don't want to be alone." "Always," he promised. Later that night, after Alyssa had taken a long shower and wrapped herself in her fluffy robe, they lay in her bed. Nicholas pulled her into his arms, her body fitting perfectly against his, head resting on his chest. "Tell me a happy story about her," he requested softly, fingers playing with her hair. "About Mrs. Chen." Alyssa was quiet for a moment, then began. "When we finished the clinic renovation, she was the first to use the new ramp. You know what she did?" "What?" "She danced," Alyssa said, and there was laughter mixed with tears in her voice. "Literally spun her walker in circles on the ramp, singing something in Mandarin. The nurse told me later it was a song from when she was young, about freedom." Nicholas smiled against her hair. She sounds like she was amazing. She was. Is. Alyssa corrected quickly, but they both knew the truth. They fell into comfortable silence for a while, just the sound of their breathing filling the room. Nicholas's hand traced lazy patterns along her arm, circles, lines, random shapes that soothed her. "Nicholas," she finally said. Thank you for staying, for not trying to fix it or minimize it. Just thank you for being here." He kissed the top of her head. "There's nowhere I'd rather be." She turned slightly so she could look at him. Even in the dim light, he could see the vulnerability in her eyes, the raw need. "I need you," she whispered. "Now. I need to feel something other than this pain." Nicholas cupped her face gently. "Alyssa, you're emotionally vulnerable. I don't want to take advantage." "You're not," she interrupted. "I'm asking you. I need to feel alive. I need to feel you. Please." He searched her eyes, making sure this was really what she wanted. What he saw there was genuine need, not just physical, but emotional. She needed connection, closeness, a reminder that she was alive and that love still existed in the world. "Okay," he whispered, "but we do this my way, slowly. Let me take care of you." She nodded, and he pulled her into a kiss that was infinitely tender. His lips moved against hers with reverence, unhurried, just feeling. Her hands slid under his shirt, seeking the warmth of his skin, and he let her, allowing himself to be touched, to be needed. He undid the tie of her robe slowly, pushing the fabric over her shoulders. She was naked underneath, and he took a moment just to look, not with lust but with pure adoration. "You're so beautiful," he murmured, fingers tracing the line of her shoulder down her arm. She helped him remove his own clothes, and then there was nothing between them. Nicholas laid her gently on her back, positioning himself over her, but not pressing down yet. Just looking, memorizing. "Look at me," he instructed softly when her eyes started to drift away. She obeyed, and he saw vulnerability there, but also trust. She trusted him with this, with her in her most fragile state. He kissed her forehead, her eyelids, her nose, cheeks, finally finding her lips again. His hands explored her body with reverent touch. Not rushed, not demanding, just loving. When they finally joined, it was so slow, so carefully, that they both gasped at the intensity. Nicholas moved with deliberate control, each movement a promise, each touch a silent declaration. "I love you," he whispered against her lips. And the words came out before he could think, before he could censor himself. Alyssa froze beneath him, eyes widening. For one terrible moment, he thought he'd ruined everything. Then she cupped his face with both hands, eyes shining with tears. "I love you too," she whispered back. "God, Nicholas, I love you so much it scares me." He kissed her deeply, moving inside her with renewed purpose. It wasn't just sex now. It was communion, it was declaration. It was every feeling they'd suppressed for years finally finding expression. They moved together, eyes locked, breaths mingling, whispering words of love and need. When they reached climax, it was together, each other's names on their lips like prayers. Afterward, Nicholas held her against him, his body wrapping around hers completely, as if he could protect her from all the pain in the world. She nestled closer, head resting over his heart, fingers tracing absent patterns on his chest. "Do you really love me?" she asked softly, vulnerability still evident in her voice. "With every part of me," he replied without hesitation. "I fought it for so long, but I can't anymore. This is it for me, Alyssa. You're everything, even when I'm stubborn and impulsive. Especially then." He kissed her hair, "Because those things make you you. And I love you. All of you." She leaned back to look at him. "Do we really make sense? We're so different." "Maybe that's why we work," he suggested. "You make me stop overthinking. I help you think things through. We balance each other." "Like yin and yang," she murmured. "Exactly." He took her hand, intertwining their fingers, "and I wouldn't trade that for anything." She smiled, genuine and radiant despite the difficult day. "Me neither." They stayed awake for hours, talking in whispers, sharing fears and dreams, building a foundation deeper than anything they'd had before. When Alyssa finally fell asleep in his arms, Nicholas remained awake a little longer, just watching her. Mrs. Chen passed away that night, peacefully in her sleep. When Alyssa got the news the next morning, she cried again. But this time, Nicholas was there to hold her, to remind her that love, in all its forms, was worth the pain of loss. Because without love, without connection, without letting people in, life was just existence, and they were both tired of just existing. Now they were living, together. Morning light flooded Alyssa's bedroom, soft and golden, filtering through the half-closed curtains. Nicholas woke first, as he always did, and took a moment just watching her sleep. Hair spread across the pillow like a dark halo, lips slightly parted, one hand resting on his chest as if, even in sleep, she needed to confirm he was there. 3 words echoed in his mind from the night before. "I love you." He had said it. She had said it back. And now, in the harsh light of day, those words seemed enormous, loaded with weight and promise and the possibility of pain. Alyssa stirred, eyelids fluttering. When her eyes opened and found his, something passed across her face, a flash of panic so quick he almost missed it. "Good morning," he said softly, kissing her forehead. "Good morning," she replied, but her voice sounded strange, distant. She pulled away, sitting up in bed, tugging the sheet to cover her body. Nicholas sat up too, watching her with growing concern. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," she said too quickly. "Just need to shower. I have to get to the clinic early today. There's a lot to organize with Mrs. Chen's funeral and everything." "Alyssa, you should go," she interrupted, still not looking at him. "I'm sure you have work too." Nicholas felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. "Are you kicking me out?" "I'm not kicking you out," she said, finally looking at him, but her eyes were guarded. "I'm just saying we both have things to do." He wanted to argue, wanted to ask what had changed between last night, when she'd said she loved him, and this morning. But there was something in the way she was holding herself, like glass about to shatter, that made him pull back. "Okay," he said slowly. "I'll call you later?" "Sure," she agreed, but it didn't sound convincing. Nicholas dressed in silence, each movement heavy with confusion and growing dread. When he left, Alyssa barely looked in his direction, already focused on her phone, fingers typing furiously, as if her life depended on it. The door closed behind him with a click that sounded too final. The following days were torture of silences and monosyllabic messages. Nicholas sent texts, "How are you? Can we talk? I miss you," and received generic responses. "I'm fine, busy, we'll talk later." He tried calling. She didn't answer, then responded hours later with excuses about work, about organizing Mrs. Chen's memorial, about 1,000 things that seemed more important than him. On the 3rd day, he showed up at the clinic during her lunch hour. The receptionist said she'd left early. He went by her apartment. No answer. Finally, on the 4th day, he found her. She was walking from the clinic parking lot to her car, head down, shoulders curved under the weight of something invisible. "Alyssa," he called, walking quickly toward her. She froze, then slowly turned. There were dark circles under her eyes, and she looked like she'd lost weight she didn't have to lose. "Nicholas, hi. Don't do this to me," he said, stopping in front of her. "Don't pretend everything's normal when it clearly isn't. I don't know what you're talking about. You're avoiding me. Since that morning, you've built a wall between us, and I don't know why." She hugged herself, looking anywhere but at him. "I just need space." "Space from what? From me? From what we said?" "From all of this," she finally exploded, eyes shining with unshed tears. "It's too much, too fast, too intense." "I told you I love you," Nicholas said, voice low but firm. "And you said it back. Or were you lying?" "I wasn't lying," she whispered. "That's the problem. I wasn't lying." He took a step closer, confusion mixing with frustration. "So what's the problem? Why are you running?" "Because I'm scared." The words came out like a torn confession. "I'm terrified, Nicholas. Don't you understand? I love you, and that terrifies me, because now you have the power to completely destroy me." "I would never do that." "You don't know that," she shot back. "People who love each other hurt each other all the time. My own impulsive decisions, your need to control everything, eventually we're going to hurt each other. And when that happens, when you realize I'm too much or not enough or just wrong for you, it'll end. and I don't know if I'll survive that." Nicholas felt his heart break. "So what? You're just going to end it now? Walk away before there's a chance of us getting hurt?" "Maybe," she said, tears finally spilling. "Maybe it's safer that way." "Safer?" He laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "Alyssa, look at you. Look at us. We're already hurting now. Running doesn't protect you from pain, it just guarantees you're alone in it. At least it's pain I can control." "You can't control love," he said fiercely, gently gripping her shoulders. "Trust me, I tried. For years I tried to control what I felt for you, rationalize it, push it away. And you know what I learned? The more you fight it, the more it hurts." She shook her head, sobbing. "I don't know how to do this. How to give myself completely when every instinct is screaming at me to protect myself. By doing exactly what you're doing right now," he said softly, wiping her tears with his thumbs. "Being honest about the fear, letting me see your broken parts, trusting that I won't run when it gets hard. What if I mess everything up? Then we'll fix it together." He rested his forehead against hers. "Alyssa, I'm not asking for perfection. I'm asking you to try. To trust me, trust us. Enough not to run at the first sign of fear." "It wasn't the first sign," she admitted with a wet laugh. "I've been terrified since that kiss in the closet." Despite everything, he smiled. "Me too. But you know what's even scarier? The idea of living without you, of going back to how we were before, teasing each other because it was the only safe way to be close." She looked up, meeting his eyes. "You really want this? Even knowing I'll probably drive you crazy with my impulsiveness?" "Especially because of that," he said. "Because you make me feel alive in ways no one else does. And yes, sometimes you'll drive me crazy, and I'll frustrate you with my need to plan everything. But we'll figure it out together." "Together," she repeated, testing the word. "Together," he confirmed. Then, because he needed her to understand completely, he added, "Alyssa, I love you. Not some edited or easier version of you, with all your fears and impulses and intense emotions. And I'll be here even when you try to push me away, especially when you try to push me away." New tears fell, but these were different, cleaner somehow. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for running, for trying to push you away when you've been so—" "No," he interrupted. "Don't apologize for being scared. Just don't shut me out when you are. Let me be with you in it." She nodded, then threw herself into his arms, clinging to him like a lifeline. He held her tight, one hand stroking her hair, the other firm on her back. "I love you," she murmured against his chest, "even though I'm terrified. Maybe especially because I'm terrified, because it means this really matters." "It matters more than anything," he agreed, kissing the top of her head. They stayed like that for a long time, right there in the parking lot, oblivious to passing cars, to people staring. There was only them holding each other, rebuilding bridges that fear had almost burned. When they finally pulled apart, Alyssa wiped her face, giving a shaky laugh. "I must look terrible." "You look beautiful," he said honestly, "and tired, and like you need a proper meal. When was the last time you ate something real?" She grimaced. "I'm not sure." "Right." He took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "We're going back to my apartment. I'm making dinner and you're going to tell me everything going through that beautiful head of yours. No running, no hiding, just honesty." "That scares me too," she admitted. "I know." He kissed her knuckles. "But we'll be scared together. Deal?" She looked at him. This man who knew her so well, who had seen her worst parts and stayed anyway, who loved her imperfections as much as her strengths, and felt something settle in her chest. Maybe love wasn't about eliminating fear. Maybe it was about finding someone worth being afraid for. Someone who held your hand even when it was shaking. Someone who didn't run when things got hard. Someone like Nicholas. "Deal," she finally said. "Together, even when I'm terrified. Especially when I'm terrified." "Especially then," he agreed. And as they walked to his car, hands intertwined, Alyssa felt the wall she'd built begin to crumble. Not completely. There was still fear, still doubt. But for the first time, she wasn't facing it alone. She had Nicholas. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. 3 weeks had passed since the parking lot. 3 weeks of slow, deliberate rebuilding. Nicholas and Alyssa were really trying him to make this work, but the shadow of Alyssa's fear still hung between them like a thin but persistent cloud. She tried to open up more, share her thoughts before they turned into panic. He tried to give space without pulling away completely, but there was a fragility to everything. Every conversation carefully calibrated, every touch heavy with the awareness that they were still walking on unstable ground. They hadn't told their friends yet. Alyssa wanted to wait until she was sure, though Nicholas didn't know what exactly she needed to be sure of. He agreed anyway, because loving her meant respecting her rhythms, even when they were exasperating. Then came the night of the rain. Nicholas was working late at the office, reviewing blueprints for a new commercial project. The rain had started around 7, first a gentle drizzle, then evolving into a full storm. Lightning tore through the sky, thunder shook the windows, and rain beat against the glass in furious waves. His phone rang at 9:30. Alyssa. He answered immediately. "Hello?" Just heavy breathing on the other end. "Alyssa, are you okay?" Her voice trembled. Can you come over?" Alarm shot through him. "What happened? Are you hurt?" "No, I just—" Another crash of thunder roared, and he heard her gasp. "The storm! I can't! Nicholas, please!" He was already grabbing his keys. "I'm coming. 20 minutes. Stay on the phone with me." "Okay," she whispered. He drove through the torrential rain, phone on speaker, talking to her about nothing and everything. Work, the absurdity of the latest episode of the show they both watched, anything to keep her mind off the storm raging outside. When he reached her apartment, he was drenched in seconds, just running from the car to her door. She opened it before he could knock, face pale, eyes wide. "Nicholas," she breathed, and then she was in his arms, trembling violently. He held her tight, not caring that he was soaked and dripping on her floor. "I'm here, you're safe, I'm here." "I'm sorry," she murmured against his wet chest. "I know it's stupid, it's just a storm, but I couldn't stop thinking about that tornado, and my grandmother, and—" Hey, he interrupted gently, pulling back enough to look into her eyes. "It's not stupid. Fear is never stupid." He guided her to the couch, pulling her into his lap, completely ignoring his wet clothes. She curled against him like a child seeking comfort, and he just held her, hand tracing gentle circles on her back. "Talk to me," he requested softly. "About the tornado. About your grandmother." Alyssa took a shaky breath. "I was 9 years old. We were at my grandmother's house for the summer. The tornado came out of nowhere, and a beautiful day turned into a nightmare in minutes." Another crash of thunder exploded, and she flinched. Nicholas held her tighter. "Keep going," he encouraged. "I'm here." We stayed in the basement for hours. I could hear things hitting the house above us, debris, pieces of the roof. My grandmother held me exactly like this. She pressed closer against him and sang to me, old songs in Portuguese that her mother used to sing to her. "She saved you," Nicholas said softly. "She always saved me." Alyssa's voice broke. "And when she needed me, when she had the stroke and the world wasn't built for her, I couldn't save her back." "Alyssa, look at me." She raised her face, tears mixing with the rain that had transferred from his wet shirt. "You saved her every day," he said fiercely. "Every ramp you fought to install, every space you made accessible, every patient you helped reclaim their dignity, you were saving her, honoring her. She knew that." "You think so?" "I know so." He wiped her tears with his thumbs. "And she would be so proud of who you've become. I'm proud of who you are." Alyssa sobbed, burying her face in his neck. "How do you always know exactly what I need to hear?" "Because I love you," he said simply. "And when you love someone, you pay attention. You learn what they need." They stayed like that for a long time, the storm raging outside while inside, in that small apartment, there was only them. Eventually, Alyssa's trembling subsided. Her breathing calmed. But she didn't pull away, and he didn't let go. "Nicholas," she finally said, voice muffled against his skin. "You're soaked. You must be freezing." "I'm fine." "No, you're not." She finally pulled back, looking at him properly for the first time. His shirt was plastered to his body, hair dripping, lips slightly blue. "God, you're shaking." "I didn't notice," he admitted, and it was true. All he'd noticed was her. She stood, pulling him by the hand. "Come on. I'm getting you dry clothes." "Alyssa, you don't need to—" "You dropped everything and drove through a terrible storm because I was scared," she interrupted. "The least I can do is give you dry clothes." 10 minutes later, Nicholas was in sweatpants that were too big, probably from some ex, a thought he firmly pushed away, and an old college t-shirt of hers. Alyssa had changed into pajamas, hair pulled up in a messy bun. She made tea for them both, and they settled back on the couch, this time side by side, covered with a soft blanket. The storm had lessened to steady but less terrifying rain. "Thank you," Alyssa said softly, looking at the cup in her hands. "For coming. For not making me feel ridiculous." "You're never ridiculous." He took her free hand. "And I'll always come when you need me. You know that, right?" She looked at him, something shifting in her expression. "Why? Why are you so patient with me when I've been so difficult?" "Because I love you," he said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Love isn't just for the easy moments, Alyssa. It's for the storms, too, literal and metaphorical." She set her teacup on the coffee table, turning completely to face him. "I'm so afraid of not being enough for you. That one day you'll wake up and realize you deserve someone less complicated, someone who doesn't panic during storms or pull away when things get intense. Then you'd wake up and realize you deserve someone less controlling," he countered. "Someone who doesn't need to plan everything or who doesn't get irritated when you act impulsively. See how that works? We can spend forever listing our flaws, or we can accept that we're messy, but we're messy together." "Messy together," she echoed, a small smile touching her lips. "Completely messy," he confirmed. "But Alyssa, I don't want someone less complicated. I want you. All your complications, all your fears, all the beautiful, terrifying intensity that is loving you." She cupped his face with both hands. "You scare me, Nicholas. The way you make me feel, it's overwhelming." "You scare me too," he admitted, "because for the first time in my life I can't control this. I can't plan for every possible outcome or guarantee everything will work out perfectly. All I can do is choose you, every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Tears filled her eyes again, but these were different, cleaner. "I want to choose you too. I want to stop running, stop letting fear control me, but I don't know if I'm strong enough." "You're the strongest person I know," he said fervently. "You dedicate your life to helping people reclaim their independence. You fight for those who can't fight for themselves. You feel everything so deeply it hurts. That's not weakness, Alyssa. That's extraordinary strength. Then why can't I stop being afraid of losing you? Because you care." He pulled her closer, until their foreheads touched. "And being afraid of losing something means it's worth having. But baby, you won't lose me, not if you don't want to." "I don't want to," she whispered. "God, Nicholas, I don't. I want you. I want this. I want to stop fighting what I feel and just surrender." "Then surrender," he said softly. "I'm here to catch you." She looked into his eyes, those dark brown eyes that had seen her at her worst and stayed, that looked at her like she was something precious, and felt the last of her resistance break. "I love you," she said, and this time there was no fear tinting the words, just truth. "I love you so much it terrifies me, but I don't want to run from it anymore. I don't want to run from you anymore." The smile that spread across his face was pure joy. "Say it again. I love you, Nicholas." She kissed one cheek. "I love you," kissed the other. "Even when you insist linguine is better than penne." He laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "That's because it is." "See? Impossible." But she was smiling too. "And still, I love you." He pulled her into a kiss that was both tender and passionate, a celebration and a promise. When they pulled apart, they were both breathless. "Stay with me tonight," she asked. "I don't want you to go." "I'm not going anywhere," he promised. They moved to her bedroom, falling into bed, intertwined. Outside, the rain continued, but here under the covers, wrapped in each other's arms, there was only warmth and safety. Nicholas kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips. "Are you okay? With the storm?" "I'm okay," she said, and realized it was true. "Because you're here." I'll always be here, he murmured against her hair, in the storms and the sunshine, in the scary moments and the perfect ones, always. Alyssa nestled closer against him, hand resting over his heart, feeling the steady beat beneath her palm. I choose you, Nicholas. I choose this. I choose us. And I choose you, he replied. Today, tomorrow, always. They stayed like that, embraced in the dark, listening to the rain gradually fade to a gentle drizzle. And as Alyssa drifted off to sleep, wrapped in the warmth and safety of his arms, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not because the fear had completely disappeared, but because for the first time she wasn't facing it alone. She had Nicholas, and he had her. And that, she finally understood, was more than enough. It was everything. 6 months later, Nicholas and Alyssa's life had transformed into something neither could have predicted in those days of teasing and barely disguised tension. Nicholas's apartment, which was now technically their apartment, was full of evidence of their intertwined lives. Nicholas's poetry books rested beside Alyssa's novels on the bookshelf. Her plants, she insisted they brought life to the space, occupied every available surface, though he'd drawn the line at putting one in the bathroom. The fridge was covered with Polaroid photos of them. At the park, making silly faces, kissing under Christmas lights, covered in flour after a disastrous attempt at making bread together. They'd told their friends, finally, during a dinner 2 weeks after the night of the storm. Maya had literally screamed, "I knew it," while Marcus collected $10 from everyone for winning the bet on when they'd finally get together. Apparently, the entire group had been watching their dance for years. "You two were painfully obvious," Maya had declared. "The sexual tension could have powered a small city." Alyssa had been mortified. Nicholas just laughed and pulled her closer, too proud to finally be able to touch her openly to care about the teasing. It was a Friday evening, and they were hosting the group's monthly dinner for the first time as an official couple. Alyssa was in the kitchen, checking the roast in the oven, while Nicholas set the table. He paused just to watch her, a habit he'd developed and never planned to stop. She wore a simple navy dress, hair pulled up in a loose bun with strands escaping around her face. She was murmuring to herself, mentally checking everything off, and when she noticed him staring, she rolled her eyes. "Stop staring and come help me with the drinks." "I can't help it," he said, approaching and wrapping his arms around her waist from behind, kissing the sensitive spot behind her ear. "You look beautiful." She melted against him, hands covering his where they rested on her stomach. "You say that every day." "Because it's true every day." She turned in his arms, looking up with that smile that still made his heart skip beats. "How do you still make me feel like this after months?" "Like what?" "Like I'm the only person in the world," she admitted softly. "Because to me, you are," he said, kissing her slowly, deeply, savoring the taste of red wine on her lips. The doorbell rang, breaking the moment. Alyssa groaned. "They're early." "Or we're late because I can't stop kissing you," Nicholas suggested, stealing one more quick kiss before releasing her. Dinner was chaotic and perfect. Maya brought too much wine, Marcus brought an elaborate dessert that was half-burned, and Rachel showed up with her new boyfriend, who spent the entire evening obviously trying to impress everyone. And through it all, Nicholas and Alyssa moved in easy synchronicity. Him grabbing her plate before she needed to ask, her passing the salt exactly when he reached for it. Small touches here and there, shared looks across the table that said more than words could. At one point during dessert, Marcus raised his glass. A toast to the two most stubborn idiots I know, who finally stopped fighting long enough to realize they were perfect for each other. "We still fight," Alyssa pointed out, but she was smiling. "But now you make up in the bedroom," Maya added with a wink. Nicholas felt Alyssa flush beside him. He took her hand under the table, intertwining their fingers, thumb tracing circles on her palm. "We still disagree on everything," he said. "She still thinks Penny is superior, which is objectively wrong. I still overplan, which drives her crazy, but we choose this," Alyssa finished, looking at him with so much love it made his chest tight. "We choose each other. Every day." "Every day," he echoed, raising their joined hands and kissing her knuckles. "Oh my God, you two are disgusting," Maya declared, but she was wiping away tears. I love it. Keep being disgusting." Later that night, after everyone had gone and the dishes were washed, Nicholas and Alyssa collapsed on the couch, exhausted but happy. She nestled against his chest, fingers playing with the top button of his shirt. "I think it was a success," she murmured. "Definitely." He kissed the top of her head, though Maya drank enough wine for 3 people. She was celebrating. Alyssa looked up. "They were all so happy for us." "How could they not be? We're disgustingly adorable." She laughed, the sound vibrating through him. "Disgustingly adorable. I'm putting that on our shared tombstone." "Our shared tombstone?" he repeated, eyebrow raised. "Planning our end together already? Well, if we're doing this," she gestured between them, "we might as well plan for the long haul, right?" He was quiet for a moment, then pulled her up to sit on his lap so they could face each other properly. "You're talking about long-term, like really long-term?" "Maybe," she said, suddenly shy. "I mean, I know it's only been 6 months, and maybe it's too soon to talk about—" He silenced her with a kiss. When they pulled apart, he was holding her face with both hands. "Alyssa, I knew on that rooftop at that clinic that it was you, forever you. So if you're asking if I'm in this for the long haul," he kissed her forehead, "the answer is absolutely yes." Tears filled her eyes. "Even when I freak out and try to push you away? Especially then." He wiped away a tear that escaped. "I'll just pull you back. And when you get too stuck in your head, planning every little detail to death, you'll remind me to breathe and live in the moment," he replied, "like you always do." She leaned in, resting her forehead against his. "We really do make sense, don't we?" "In a weird, unlikely way, yes," he agreed. "You're my spontaneity when I'm too rigid. I'm your foundation when you're flying too high. We balance each other, like yin and yang." "Exactly." He kissed her softly. "So yes, to answer your unasked question, I want long-term, I want everything. Marriage, kids if you want them, growing old together while still arguing about Italian pasta." She laughed through the tears. "Kids? You've thought about kids?" "I've thought about everything with you," he admitted. "Little girls with your hair and my stubbornness, or boys with my eyes and your huge heart, teaching them to build things and to care about people, together." "Nicholas," she whispered, completely undone. "Too soon?" he asked, suddenly nervous. "No." She kissed him deeply. "No, not too soon at all, because I've been thinking about it too. About a lifetime with you. About teaching our kids that it's okay to be different, that love means choosing someone even when it's hard, that penne is superior to linguine," he interrupted with a grin. She swatted his shoulder playfully. "You're ruining the moment." "Sorry." He pulled her closer, hands sliding under her shirt to find warm skin. "Continue, it was getting good." "I was saying," she continued, fingers curling in his hair, "that I love you, that I want to build a life with you, that I still can't believe the man who used to drive me crazy with frustration now drives me crazy in completely different ways." "Good ways?" he murmured against her neck, lips tracing patterns on her skin. "The best ways," she breathed, tilting her head to give him more access. They moved to the bedroom, a trail of clothes marking their path. And when they finally fell into bed, intertwined, it was familiar and new at the same time. The thrill of knowing each other so well mixed with the discovery of new ways to love each other. Afterward, lying in the darkness, Alyssa traced lazy patterns on Nicholas's chest while he played with her fingers. "Hey, Nicholas," she said softly. "I still don't like that you're always right." He smiled against her hair. "But you love me anyway, mostly because of it." She lifted her head, meeting his eyes in the dimness. "Because you challenge me, make me think, force me to grow, and because, despite all our differences, you're the person who understands me most in the world. And you," he said, pulling her up until he could kiss her properly, "are my favorite person to disagree with. Just disagree. And agree with. And laugh with. And build a life with." He rolled so he was hovering over her, eyes locked on hers. "You're my everything, Alyssa. Every version of you. The teasing one, the caregiver, the scared one, the brave one. All of you." "I love you," she whispered, pulling him down for another kiss. "I love you more," he murmured against her lips. "Not possible." She smiled. Because I love you more. Are we going to have to disagree about this too? Forever, she promised. And as they made love again, slowly and tenderly in the darkness, they both knew they'd found something rare and precious. Not perfect love, but real love. Love that chose to stay through the hard parts. Love that laughed at differences and celebrated similarities. Love that transformed rivals into partners, teasing into affection. Love that was simply perfectly theirs. 3 years later, at a dinner with friends in the same cafe where it all began, Willow's with its tall windows and the smell of fresh coffee, Nicholas and Alyssa sat side by side. She held his hand under the table, fingers playing with the wedding ring he now wore. I still can't believe you two got married, Marcus commented, shaking his head. Remember when you couldn't be in the same room without arguing? They still argue, Maya pointed out. Just now it's about couple things, like whose turn it is to do the dishes. It's always Nicholas's turn, Alyssa declared. That's not true and you know it, Nicholas retorted, but he was smiling. See? Maya gestured toward them. Case in point. Alyssa leaned in, whispering just loud enough for Nicholas to hear. I still don't like that you're always right. He turned, capturing her lips in a quick kiss, not caring that their friends were watching. But you love me anyway. Mostly because of it, she echoed the words that had become their mantra. And as the cafe filled with laughter and conversation, with the smell of coffee and the promise of years still to come, Nicholas held his wife's hand. His wife, a thought that still made his heart race, and knew that every tease, every argument, every moment of painful tension had been worth it, because it led them here, to this moment, to this life, to everything. Nicholas and Alyssa proved that sometimes the truest love is born exactly where we least expect it, in the tension between opposites, in the space between teasing and truth. They spent years hiding behind sarcasm, fearing the intensity of what they really felt. But when they finally had the courage to stop fighting and start loving, they discovered that their differences weren't obstacles. They were exactly what made them perfect together. He taught her to breathe. She taught him to fly. And together, they built something stronger than either of them could have alone. Because in the end, love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone worth choosing every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And you, are you fighting against something or someone that your heart has already chosen? If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and become a member to get early access to upcoming stories. And if you felt it was really worth listening to, hit that super thanks button too. Your support makes all the difference and helps us keep bringing you stories that move you. Oh, and drop a comment below. Where are you listening to this story from right now?